The ballroom of the Waldorf-Astoria blazed with the pale light of 200 crystal chandeliers, but the atmosphere was not WALDORF. It was the sterile heat of a place where power was polished and reputations were stripped. The Humanitarian Award Gala was an annual ritual, a theater of benevolence where the elite publicly canonized one of their own. Tonight, the altar was set for John Reid. He sat in the second row, center aisle, a position of honor that felt more like a dock. His suit cost $700 bought off the rack at a department store in Arlington. His hands rested on his thighs, palms down, fingers relaxed. He watched the podium with the fixed, unblinking gaze of a man who had once tracked a moving target through a sandstorm at 300 meters. The man at the microphone was General Marshal Vance, Reid's former deputy. Vance was tall, silver-haired, with a jawline that could cut glass. He was also a liar of extraordinary talent. 10 years ago, Vance boomed, his voice filling the room with reverberant authority, we lost a hero. A man who stood for integrity, for duty, for the very soul of this nation. We were told he died in the line of duty. That he was a victim of treachery. That he gave his life to protect this country. Vance paused, letting the silence build. He was a master of the pause, a conductor of public emotion. His eyes scanned the room, landing on each table with the precision of a scanner. Finally, his gaze settled on Reid. The room followed his gaze. 200 pairs of eyes bored into the man in the second row. Reid did not flinch. He did not shift. His hands remained motionless on his thighs. But the truth is FAR, Vance continued, his voice dropping to a confidential rumble. The truth is that the man we mourned was not a victim. He was a coward. A deserter. A man who sold out his own platoon for a bribe of $2 million in laundered currency. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Cameras flashed. The press had been told this was a ceremony of rehabilitation, not execution. Vance had orchestrated the narrative carefully, leaking hints to favorable journalists, seeding doubt in the weeks leading up to the event. Now he was harvesting the crop. I served with John Reid, Vance said, his voice dripping with feigned pain. I called him a brother. I trusted him with my life. And in return, he betrayed that trust. He left 18 men in the Kandahar Valley to die. He took the money and he disappeared. We buried empty coffins. We gave medals to widows who had been lied to. And today, I stand here to correct that injustice. To tell the world what John Reid really is. Vance raised a finger. A slide projected on the wall behind him, a bank statement, a transfer of $2.1 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The account had Reid's name on it, clear and unambiguous. The date stamp matched the timeline of the Kandahar operation. The documentation was impeccable, forged with the kind of meticulous CARE that only a man who had spent decades in military intelligence could achieve. Here is the proof, Vance said, pointing at the slide. The receipt of his shame. The evidence that John Reid, the man who sits in this room today, is nothing but a traitor wearing a three-piece suit. A man who took blood money and called it retirement. The room erupted. Murmurs became shouts. Chairs scraped against the marble floor. A woman in the front row, Reid's sister-in-law, covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with horror. Reid's own son, sitting 3 rows back, read at the back of his father's head with a mixture of disbelief and growing disgust. Reid had not told him. He had told no one. That was the deal he had made with himself. The loneliest deal a man could make. Vance leaned into the microphone, his voice now a conspiratorial stage whisper that carried to every corner of the ballroom. Mr. Reid. I ask you now, publicly, to confirm or deny. Is this your account? Is this your signature? Is this the money you took in exchange for the lives of 18 American soldiers? The room went silent. Not the silence of respect, but the silence of a crowd waiting for a CAR crash. Every eye was on Reid. The cameras zoomed in. The press held their breath. Vance stood at the podium, a predator who had cornered his prey, his silver hair glinting under the spotlights. Reid rose slowly. He did not rush. He did not stumble. He buttoned his jacket with a single, deliberate motion, his fingers moving with the economy of a man who had performed this gesture 1,000 times before in 1,000 different uniforms. His shoulders were broad, his posture rigid. He walked toward the podium, not rushing, not dragging. The crowd parut for him. Fear, not respect, Clea read the path. People leaned back in their chairs as if his mere passage might ignite something. Reid stopped 2 feet from the podium. He did not look at the slide. He did not look at the audience. He looked directly at Vance. His eyes were the color of burnt steel, flat and unblinking. "General Vance," Reid said. His voice was low, rough, a voice that had been used to shout orders over gunfire and whisper encouragement to dying men. "Are you certain that account is mine?" Vance sneered. The sneer was a performance, a weapon he had perfected over decades of press conferences and congressional hearings. "I have the documents. I have your signature, your identity, your digital footprint. The evidence is irrefutable. The bank confirmed the account holder. The middle initial matches. The social security number on file is yours. The address is your last known residence. What more do you need?" Reid nodded. A small, almost imperceptible dip of his chin. He reached into his jacket pocket. The room tensed. Security guards took a step forward, their hands moving toward their waistbands. But Reid pulled out only a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges, the kind of paper that had been carried for years in a pocket, folded and refolded until the creases were soft as fabric. He unfolded it slowly, deliberately, his thumb running along the center fold. "I have a document too," Reid said, his voice still low, still flat. "It's a letter. Written by a man who died in Kandahar. His name was Sergeant First Class Michael Torres. He was one of the 18 you claim I abandoned." The name landed like a grenade. Vance's sneer faltered for a fraction of a second. His left eye twitched, a micro-expression that only a trained observer would have caught. Reid was a trained observer. He had spent 20 years reading the faces of hostiles in negotiation, of allies in crisis, of enemies in surrender. He saw the twitch. He filed it away. "Sergeant Torres was my radio operator," Reid continued, his eyes never leaving Vance. "He was also your brother-in-law. He was the man you sent into the valley with a burned compass and a dead battery. Because he knew the truth about the drug runs you were orchestrating through the air base. He knew about the $2 million RS you hid in a shell company registered in Panama. The same $2 million RS that now sits in an account with my name on it. A name you forged." Vance laughed. The laugh was sharp, brittle, a weapon deployed to regain control. "This is absurd. You have no evidence. You have a letter from a dead man. He RSAY. Admissible in no court, no military tribunal. You're grasping at ghosts, Reid. You're desperate." "I don't need a tribunal," Reid said. "I need this room." He folded the letter with the same deliberate care and returned it to his pocket. He reached in again and pulled out a second object. A small, black drive, no la ridger than his thumb. He held it up between 2 fingers, letting the chandelier light catch its surface. "On this drive," Reid said, "is the complete log from the Kandahar air base. Not the log that was filed. The real log. The one that records every flight, every cargo manifest, every radio transmission. It shows that the 18 men were not abandoned. They were orchestrated. Their position was given to the enemy by a secure line that only 3 people had access to. I was one. You were the second. The third was General HRRIS, who died of a HERT attack 6 months later, leaving you as the only living source. The only man who could have given the order. The only man who had the motive. Reid placed the drive on the podium, directly between him and Vance. The slide behind them still showed the fraudulent bank statement, but the drive now sat on the polished wood, a quiet challenge to, "You sent your own brother-in-law to die," Reid said, his voice rising for the first time, not to a shout, but to a volume that commanded every corner of the room. "You sent him because he threatened to expose your operation. The drug money was shipped on medical supply planes. The profits were laundered through a series of false charities. One of them, ironically, is the very foundation that's giving me this award tonight. You hid the blood money in plain sight, under the banner of humanitarian aid." A man in the third row, the foundation's chairman, bolted upright. His face was the color of cement. His hands trembled on the table. The cameras swiveled toward him. He tried to speak, but only a strangled sound emerged. The room had forgotten him. The room had forgotten everyone except the two men at the podium. Reid did not acknowledge the chaos. His attention was locked on Vance. The general's composure had shattered. Not dramatically. Not with a scream or a denial. But a single, involuntary twitch in his left eye, followed by a tick in his jaw. The mask was cracking. "You planted the evidence," Reid said, each word a stone dropped into still water. "You forged the signatures. You bribed the clerk in the offshore bank to backdate the transfer. But you made one mistake. A small mistake. A single letter. The name on the account is John Reid. But my legal name, the name I enlisted under, the name on my birth certificate and my military ID, is Jonathan Edward Reid. The account says John Michael Reid. A single middle initial. The clerk you bribed didn't know the difference. But the bank's digital verification system did. It flagged the discrepancy the same day you set up the account. The flag was never removed. It's been sitting in a database for 6 years, waiting for someone to look for it. I looked. I found it. I have a copy." Reid turned to the audience. His voice rose again, not to a shout, but to a frequency that cut through the murmurs. "The $2 million RS is still in that account. It has never been touched. Because the man who created it knew that the moment he withdrew a single cent, the fraud would be exposed. He didn't want the money. He wanted the narrative. He wanted to destroy me so that he could control the story of what happened in Kandahar, so that no one would ever look at the air base logs. So that no one would ever ask why Sergeant Torres had a copy of the original manifest in his locker. He wanted to bury the 18 men a second time." Reid reached into his pocket a third time. He pulled out a small, folded photograph. He held it up. It showed Sergeant Torres, alive, smiling, holding a paper document. The document was the original air base manifest, the one that listed the cargo planes, the medical supplies, and the drug shipments that had been hidden among them. Reid tossed the photograph onto the podium. It landed face down, but everyone knew what it was. "Torres gave me that photograph the night before he died," Reid said. "He said, 'Sir, if anything happens to me, make sure someone sees this.' I didn't know what he meant. I thought it was paranoia. The next morning, his patrol was ambushed. The enemy knew exactly where they were. Exactly when they would pass. Exactly how many men were in the formation. Because you told them, Vance. You used a burner phone and a satellite link that you thought was untraceable. But the company that operated the satellite kept a record of every active link. And that record, which I have also obtained, shows your personal security code logged in at 3:14 a.m. the morning of the attack. The same code that unlocked your office, your safe, and your personal computer." Vance Sta read at the photograph. His hands, gripping the podium, had gone white at the knuckles. His jaw worked silently. For a long moment, he said nothing. The room held its breath. The cameras captured every second. The second stretched into an eternity. REID stepped back from the podium. He looked at Vance with an expression that was not triumph, not pity, not anger. It was the flat, empty gaze of a man who had just completed a mission he had been given years ago. A mission that had cost him everything. "You have a choice," Reid said. "You can walk away from this podium. You can pretend this didn't happen. You can spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Or you can stay. You can stand here and face what you did. But whether you stay or go, the evidence is already in motion. The drive has a timed release. The logs, the financial records, the satellite transmissions, and the photograph, all of it has been sent to every major news outlet in this country. It will be published at midnight. Unless, of course, you choose to stop it. But you can't. Because the server is in a jurisdiction that does not recognize your authority. I made sure of that too." Vance's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. No sound came out. The general who had commanded armies, who had addressed Congress, who had shaken hands with presidents, was rendered speechless by a man in an OFF Thorac suit and a folded letter. REID turned his back on Vance. He walked toward the exit. The crowd was frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. The cameras followed him. He reached the double doors and pushed them open. The night air rushed in, cold and sharp. He did not look back. He walked out into the empty street. A single black car sat at the curb, engine running. Reid walked toward it. He did not hurry. He did not smile. His face was a mask of calm, but his hands, shoved deep in his pockets, were clenched so tightly that his knuckles ached. The car door opened. A man in a dark suit nodded. Reid slid into the back seat. The door closed. The car pulled away. Inside the ballroom, General Marshal Vance remained at the podium. He stood motionless for a full 20 seconds. Then he reached for the microphone. His hand was shaking. He couldn't speak. He read his throat. Still nothing. The room watched in stunned silence. The cameras captured every second. Vance finally managed a single word. "Security." But his voice was a rasp. No one moved. The security guards, who had been ready to tackle Reid, were now staring at Vance with an expression that was not loyalty, but hesitation. The kind of hesitation that comes when a leader's authority has been cracked beyond repair. The Secretary of Defense rose from his seat in the back row. He had been invited as an observer, not a participant. Reid had made sure of that too. The Secretary walked slowly toward the podium, his steps measured, deliberate. He stopped beside Vance. He leaned in and spoke in a voice so low that the microphone didn't catch it. But the audience saw Vance's face collapse. The general's shoulders slumped. He gripped the podium as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. The Secretary turned to the crowd. "The gala is adjourned. Effective immediately. All attendees are requested to exit through the side doors. The press will remain in place for a briefing." Chaos followed. Not the chaos of panic, but the chaos of shattered hierarchies. Men and women who had spent their lives mingling with power were suddenly unsure of who to follow. The Foundation chairman was surrounded by 3 federal agents who had entered from a side entrance. The press was frantic, typing on phones, calling their editors. The world was about to change. Outside the hotel, the black car turned a corner and disappeared into the city's glowing canyon of skyscrapers. Reid leaned back in the leather seat. The driver, a former member of his old platoon, did not ask where they were going. He already knew. They were heading to a private airfield. A plane was waiting. The destination was not yet decided. But the timing was. Reid's phone vibrated in his pocket. He did not check it. He knew what it would say. The news alerts were already going out. The headlines would be breaking within minutes. But he did not need to read them. He had already seen the future. He had already lived the aftermath 1,000 times in his mind. In the ballroom, the Secretary of Defense had taken the podium. He spoke to the press with the flat tone of a bureaucrat delivering bad news. General Vance will be placed on administrative leave. The matter will be referred to the Department of Justice for further investigation. No further questions at this time. Vance had been escorted out a back entrance. His face was now visibly aged. The silver hair seemed grayer. The jawline had softened into jowls. He walked with the unsteady gait of a man who had lost his sense of gravity. The door closed behind him. The cameras captured that the CAR pulled up to the airfield. The plane, a small jet with no markings, sat on the tarmac, its engines already spooling. Reid stepped out of the CAR, he walked across the asphalt. The wind was cold. It whipped his jacket against his body. He climbed the steps to the plane without looking back. The plane door closed. The engines rose to AROAR, the jet began to taxi. Reid sat in the cockpit's second seat. He buckled his harness. The pilot, another old platoon member, raised his thumb. They were clear for takeoff. The plane lifted off into the night sky. The city lights fell away. Reid turned his head and looked out the window. He saw the glittering sprawl, the ROW streets, the tall buildings. In one of those buildings, a ceremony had just been destroyed. A reputation had been crushed. A narrative had been shattered. Reid reached into his pocket. He pulled out the folded letter from Sergeant Torres. He unfolded it. He read the words he had memorized years ago. "Sir, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I want you to know I never blamed you. I never doubted you. I knew you would make it right. I knew you would find the truth. I knew you would not let them bury us. I'm proud to have served with you. Tell my wife I love her. But most of all, tell the world the truth. That's all I ever wanted. Torres." Reid folded the letter and slid it back into his pocket. He closed his eyes. The plane rose through the clouds, leaving the city and the ceremony and the lies behind. The engines hummed a steady, unrelenting drone. The night was dark, boundless, and absolutely silent except for the rhythmic pulse of the jet. He had done it. He had executed the plan. He had destroyed the general. He had released the evidence. He had told the truth. But he had not told his son. He had not told the family. He had left them in the room, surrounded by the remains of the explosion. He did not know if they would ever forgive him. He did not know if he would ever see them again. He had accepted that price. That the pilot spoke without turning. "Where to, sir?" Reid opened his eyes. He read at the dark window, at his own reflection superimposed over the distant glow of the city that was already becoming a memory. He did not answer immediately. The pilot waited. The engines hummed. The night pressed against the glass. Reid's phone buzzed again. And again. A steady stream of notifications. The news outlets had begun to run the story. The headlines were already writing themselves. He turned the phone face down on the console. He looked forward, through the windshield, at the infinite blackness. The pilot was still waiting. "North," Reid said. His voice was flat. "Empty. Just north." The pilot nodded. The plane banked slightly, turning toward the dark horizon. The city lights finally vanished. There was nothing but the stars and the sound of the engines and the cold, steady hum of a man who had just won everything and lost everything in the same breath. Reid leaned back in his seat. He did not sleep. He did not speak. He simply read ahead, into the darkness, as the plane CA ride him into a future he had not yet decided to inhabit. The evidence was out. The general was destroyed. The truth was finally, irrevocably, public. The plane continued north. The night stretched forever. The private jet cut through the cloud layer, its engines a steady drone that filled the cabin with white noise. John Reid sat in the leather bucket seat, his fingers interlaced over his stomach, his eyes fixed on the arcade window. The reflection of his own face sta read back at him, a gaunt, weathered face with deep lines around the mouth and eyes that had not slept peacefully in 6 years. The plane was heading north, but that was a direction, not a destination. Reid had not decided where he was going. He had only decided where he was leaving. The pilot, a stocky man with a cropped gray beard named Colonel Davis, spoke over the intercom. "Sir, we've got a contact. Ground radio picking up a transmission with your name on it. Coming from the hotel. They're trying to raise you." REID unclasped his hands and reached for the handheld radio mounted on the console. He pressed the transmit button. "This is Reid. What's the message?" A crackling voice came through, distorted by interference. "Sir, it's the Secretary's office. They're requesting your immediate return. They're saying the situation is unstable and your presence is required for CLA verification." Reid released the button. He read at the radio for a long moment. The Secretary of Defense had been in the room. He had seen the evidence. He had heard the accusations. And now, less than an hour later, he was requesting Reid's return. It was not a request. It was a summons. The kind of summons that preceded a quiet room, 2 UNMARKED agents, and a permanent relocation to a black site. REID pressed the button again. "Tell the Secretary I'm unavailable. Tell him the plane has mechanical issues. Tell him whatever you want. But do not give him my location. Understand?" "Understood, sir." REID set the radio back on the console. He leaned back in his seat. The plane hummed around him, a metal bubble of precarious safety. The city had disappeared from the window. Below, there was nothing but the dark patchwork of rural America, fields, highways, the occasional cluster of lights that marked a small town. He had spent 20 years protecting that landscape. He had spent the last 6 years watching it from the outside. The irony was not lost on him. Davis spoke again. "Sir, we're approaching the Canadian border. I need a heading. Do we turn west or do we continue north?" Reid rubbed his eyes with the palms of his hands. The exhaustion was crushing. Adrenaline had ride him through the ceremony, through the confrontation, through the escape. But now the adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the bone-deep fatigue of a man who had lived on the edge for too long. He had not slept more than 4 hours a night in years. He had not eaten a proper meal in days. The plane's cabin pressurized and hummed, and the darkness outside seemed to press against the glass like a living thing. "Continue north," Reid said. "We'll figure out the rest when we're over Canadian airspace." Davis nodded and adjusted the controls. The plane droned on. Reid closed his eyes, but sleep did not come. Instead, images flickered behind his eyelids. The flash of the camera. The twitch in Vance's eye. The face of his son, staring at him with disgust. That image cut deeper than any other. Was 26 years old, a lawyer with a bright future, a man who had grown up worshipping his father. Reid had taken him to baseball games, taught him to fish, showed him how to strip a rifle and clean it. He had also lied to him for 6 years. He had let him believe the public narrative. He had let him bury the man he thought his father was. The plane's altimeter beeped. Reid opened his eyes. Davis was typing on the keyboard, his brows furrowed. "Sir, I'm picking up a second transmission. This one is not from the Secretary. It's encrypted. Melita RY grade. It's coming through a frequency that was retired 5 years ago. REID sat up straighter. The fatigue slipped away, replaced by a sharp, focused alertness. Put it through. Speaker. A voice came through the cabin speakers. It was distorted, scrambled by the encryption, but the cadence was unmistakable. It was the voice of a man Reid had not spoken to in 4 years. General Arthur Cole. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The man who had recommended Reid for his 4th STAR, the man who had been forced into retirement after a political scandal that was no scandal at all, just a power play by the administration Vance served. Reid, the voice said. I know you're listening. I know you're on a plane heading north. And I know you're flying blind. Stop. Land in Bangor. I'll have a CAR waiting. We need to talk. The transmission cut off. Davis looked over his shoulder. Sir, that's a direct violation of the Secretary's order. If we land in Bangor, we're within U.S. jurisdiction. We're not clear of the border for another 20 minutes. We can still turn. REID leaned forward, his jaw was clenched so tightly that he could feel the pulse in his temple. General Cole was a ghost. A man who had been buried by the same apparatus that was now chasing Reid. But Cole was also the only man in the Melita re-establishment who knew the full scope of the Kandahar operation. He had been the one who orchestrated the cover-up after Reid was framed. He had not been part of the conspiracy, he had been part of the cleanup. He had told Reid to go underground. He had told Reid to wait. He had told Reid that the truth would have its day. And now he was calling. Land in Bangor, Reid said. But before we do, I want you to do something. I want you to scramble the plane's transponder. I want US invisible to every radar from here to the border. I don't want the Secretary to know we landed. Davis nodded. His fingers flew across the console. The plane banked slightly, turning toward the east. The instrument panel flickered as the transponder went to RK. The aircraft became a ghost in the sky. The landing was smooth. Bangor International Airport was quiet at this hour, a small regional hub with only a handful of lights illuminating the runway. The plane taxied to a secluded hangar on the perimeter of the field. Davis shut down the engines. The silence that followed was deafening. Reid unbuckled his harness and stood. He walked to the door and pushed it open. The cold night air hit him like a physical wall. The smell of jet fuel and wet asphalt filled his lungs. He stepped down the stairs and onto the top RMAC. A single black SUV sat at the edge of the hangar, its headlights off. The driver's door opened. A figure emerged. Tall, slender, wearing a long coat that flapped in the wind. It was not General Cole. It was a woman. REID stopped. He did not reach for a weapon because he had no weapon. He had left everything behind in the CAR, everything except the letter, the drive, and the photograph. His hands were empty. His eyes were not. Who are you? He asked. The woman walked toward him. Her step was confident, measured. She was in her 40s, with short cropped hair and a face that had seen combat. She was carrying a folder under her arm. She stopped 5 feet from Reid. My name is Colonel Sarah Keller, she said. I work for General Cole. He couldn't be here in person. He's under house arrest. The Secretary ordered it 30 minutes ago. Right after the ceremony ended. Reid's eyes narrowed. House arrest? On what grounds? Sedition, Keller said flatly. The Secretary is moving fast. He's closing ranks. Vance is in custody, but that doesn't mean the conspiracy is over. It means they're going into damage control. And damage control means neutralizing everyone who knows the full picture. That includes you. That includes Cole. And that includes me now. She held out the folder. Reid took it. He did not open it. He held it in his hand, feeling the weight of the paper. What's in this? He asked it. The next piece of the puzzle, Keller said. You exposed Vance. You proved the account was fraudulent. You released the air base logs. But that's only the first layer. The drug money didn't stop at Vance. It went higher. Much higher. The $2 million RS was a test. A pilot program. If Vance could pull it off without raising suspicion, the operation would expand. And it did. The manifests in that folder show shipments worth $200 million RS. Drugs. Weapons. Human trafficking. All run through the same network of false charities. The foundation that was giving you the AWA RD tonight was just the tip of the iceberg. There are 2 dozen more. And they're all connected to a single office in the Pentagon. Reid opened the folder. His eyes scanned the pages. The manifests were crystalline, detailed, impeccable. Each one had a signature at the bottom. Each one had a date. Each one led to a single name. A name he had not expected. A name that made his blood run cold. The Secretary of Defense, Reid said. His voice was really a whisper. Keller nodded. The Secretary was the architect. Vance was the field operator. The $2 million RS was seed money. The profits were laundered back into the Pentagon's black budget. Off the books. Untraceable. Until now. Reid closed the folder. He stood in the cold night air, the wind whipping his jacket, the folder pressed against his chest. The implications were staggering. The Secretary of Defense was the second most powerful man in the military establishment. Exposing him would require more than evidence. It would require a platform. A battlefield. A ceremony. Why is Cole helping me? Reid asked. He's under house arrest. He's risking everything. Keller's expression redeemed. Because he was the one who found the manifests. He was the one who tracked the money. He was the one who realized that the Kandahar operation was never about the $2 million RS. It was about testing the system. Seeing if the laundry network could handle a large-scale transaction without setting off a la RMS. Vance passed the test. The Secretary expanded the operation. And everyone who knew the truth was eliminated. Torres. HRAS. The clerk in Panama. The list goes on. Cole knew he was next. That's why he reached out to you. Because you're the only one who can stop it. You're the only one who has no ties to the system. The only one who has already blown up the first layer. Reid looked at the hangar, at the plane. At the RK sky. The STARS were out, cold and distant, witnesses to a conspiracy that had spanned RS and cost lives. He had thought the ceremony was the final act. He had thought that exposing Vance would be the end of it. He had been wrong. The ceremony was only the first move in a much richer game. What do you need from me? He asked. Keller stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a confidential rumble. The Secretary is scheduled to give a press conference tomorrow morning. He's going to announce that the Kandahar investigation has been reopened. He's going to cast himself as the reformer, the man who will clean up the mess that Vance created. He's going to use your evidence as the foundation for his own narrative. And he's going to bury the truth about his own involvement. By the time anyone realizes the manifests go higher, he'll have already destroyed the originals. He'll have already wiped the digital trail. He'll be untouchable. Reid's fingers tightened on the folder. So you want me to expose him before the press conference? I want you to expose him during the press conference, Keller said. He'll be standing at the podium. The whole world will be watching. It's the same play you ran tonight, but with a bigger stage. And this time, you won't be the accused. You'll be the judge. REID'S read at her. The plane's engines hissed as they cled. The wind blew through the hangar, ca rying the scent of rain. He thought of his son. He thought of the empty coffins. He thought of Sergeant Torres, dying in a valley that should have been safe. The weight of the folder in his hands felt heavier than any weapon he had ever ca-ried. "I need a room," Reid said. "A safe room. And I need 12 hours. I need to study these documents. I need to understand the full scope of what I'm walking into." Keller nodded. "I've already arranged it. There's a cabin 30 miles north of here. Off the grid. No phone, no internet, no satellite link. Cole owns it. He's been preparing for this moment for 3 years. The road is dirt. The neighbors are trees. No one will find you." REID turned to Davis, who had remained in the plane, watching the conversation through the windshield. "Davis. Take the plane back to the airfield we left. File a flight plan for Mexico. Make sure anyone who looks for me thinks I went south." Davis raised his thumb. "Yes, sir. I'll make it look good." "And sir?" REID paused at BCA Refill. "The Secretary doesn't play games. He plays chess. And he's always 3 moves ahead." REID nodded. He walked toward the black SUV. Keller opened the driver's door and slid behind the wheel. Reid climbed into the passenger seat. The door closed with a solid thunk. Keller root the engine. The SUV pulled away from the hangar, its headlights cutting a path through the darkness that the road was now row and winding. The trees pressed close on both sides, their branches overhanging the asphalt like a tunnel. Reid watched the headlights play over the bark and the leaves. His mind was a churning maze of numbers, names, dates, and manifests. He had exposed a lie. Now he was about to expose a system. Keller spoke without taking her eyes off the road. "There's something else. Something you need to know before we reach the cabin." "What is it?" "Your son. Ma-RK. He left the hotel 20 minutes after you did. He's been trying to reach you. But he didn't call your phone. He called a number that the Secretary's office has been tapping for the last 2 years. Your old military line. The one you haven't used in 6 years." Reid's stomach dropped. "They tapped that line." "Everyone's line," Keller said. "They were monitoring for any contact from you. Any sign that you were going to break your cover. They didn't expect you to do it at a public ceremony. They expected a quiet, back-channel leak. A burner phone. A meeting in a parking garage. Your son's call was a surprise. But it also means they know he's trying to reach you. They know he's not on their side." Reid pressed his palm against his forehead. The cold glass of the window pressed against his fingers. Ma-RK was in danger. Not because he knew anything, but because he was trying to find out. Because he was a lever. A weak point. A way to get to Reid without having to find the plane that "I need to call him," Reid said. "I need to warn him." "You can't," Keller said. "Any call you make will be traced. Any message you send will be intercepted. The only way to protect him is to finish this. To expose the Secretary, to destroy the system. Once the truth is public, they have no reason to hurt him. And they have no power to hide anything." The SUV pulled off the main road and onto a dirt track. The headlights bounced over ruts and rocks. The trees became denser. The cabin read out of the darkness, a small log structure with a porch and a chimney. No lights were on. No cars were parked. It looked abandoned. It looked perfect. Keller cut the engine. The silence was absolute. Not even the crickets chirped. REID stepped out of the SUV. He walked toward the cabin. The folder was under his arm, the cold air bit his lungs. He pushed open the door. Inside, it was spartan but clean. A wooden table. A single lamp. A stack of papers. A fresh notebook. A bottle of whiskey. And a photograph on the mantelpiece. A photograph of General Cole, shaking hands with a younger Reid, both of them in uniform, both of them smiling. Reid set the folder on the table. He sat in the wooden chair. He turned on the lamp. The light was yellow, weak, but it was enough. He opened the folder and began to read. The lamp hummed a faint, yellow glow over the scattered papers. Reid had been reading for 4 hours. The manifests were spread across the table like a strategic map, each page a piece of a pattern he had been trying to assemble in his mind for years. The names, the dates, the shipment numbers, all of them were a language he had once spoken fluently. But the scope was new. The scale was dazzling. He ran his finger down a column of figures. The $200 million Rs Keller had mentioned was only the beginning. The real number, the one buried in the footnotes of the footnotes, was closer to 800 million. The charities were fronts, but the money did not just flow through them. It flowed through a network of shell companies, each one registered in a different jurisdiction. Panama. The Caymans. Singapore. The Seychelles. Each transaction was structured to be under the radar of any single regulatory body. Together, they formed a river of corruption that ran directly into the Pentagon's black budget. Reid leaned back in the chair. The wood creaked. He rubbed his eyes with the heels of his palms. The exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing on his shoulders, dragging at his lids. But he could not sleep. Not yet. There was a piece missing. A single link in the chain that he could not see. Keller had stayed outside, patrolling the perimeter of the cabin. She had not spoken in hours. Reid could hear her footsteps on the porch, the creak of the wooden planks under her boots. The rhythm was soothing in its predictability. A shift every 3 minutes. A stop at the corner. A pause to listen. She had been trained well. The cabin's door opened. Cold air swept in, carrying the smell of pine and frost. Keller stepped inside, her breath fogging in the light. She was carrying a satchel phone, a ruggedized unit with a scrambler attached. "I have a problem," she said. "A friend in the Secretary's office just sent me a warning. There's a sweep team heading in this direction. They don't know the exact location yet, but they've narrowed it down to a 10-mile radius. They're using heat-seeking drones. They'll find the cabin within the hour." Reid did not flinch. He had expected something like this. The Secretary was not a man who left loose ends. The drive had been released, but the live evidence, the physical copies, the original manifests, had to be destroyed. That was the Secretary's play. Bury the proof before the public could digest it. "We can't outrun drones on foot," Reid said. "And we can't take the SUV without leaving a thermal trail they can follow from the air. So we stay. We let them find the cabin." Keller read at him. "That's suicide." "No," Reid said. "It's a trap. They're coming for the evidence. For the manifests. But I have already memorized the key figures. The names. The dates. The account numbers. I don't need the paper anymore. I need them to think I do." He stood. He crossed to the mantelpiece and picked up the photograph of Cole. He studied it for a moment, then set it down. He turned back to the table. "Here's what we do. We leave the manifests on the table. We leave the lamp on. We take the satchel phone and the whiskey, and we move to the woodshed out back. It's cold, it's to RK, and it's 50 RDS from the cabin. The drones will lock onto the heat signature of the lamp and the papers. They won't scan the woodshed until they've secured the main building. That gives us a window." Keller nodded. "And once they're inside? Once they see the manifests? Then they'll call the Secretary, they'll tell him they have the evidence. They'll tell him the operation is contained. He'll relax. He'll let his RD down. And that's when we strike. REID moved quickly. He gathered the papers into a neat stack. He placed them in the center of the table, weighted down by the lamp's base. He left the notebook open, pages scribbled with notes that were deliberately incomplete. A performance. A stage set for the intruders. He picked up the satchel phone and the whiskey. He motioned for Keller to follow. They exited through the back door, their boots silent on the frozen ground. The woodshed was a small structure, half collapsed, its roof BA-Relay covered with rusted tin. The door swung open on rusty hinges. Reed slipped inside. Keller followed. The door closed behind them, leaving them in Stygian darkness. The cold was brutal. Reed's breath fogged in front of his face. He could hear Keller's shallow breathing beside him. They stood in the darkness, waiting. The drones came first. The whine of their rotors was a high-pitched buzz that seemed to come from every direction at once. Reed counted 3 distinct frequencies. 3 drones. Then the footsteps. Boots crunching on frozen gravel. Multiple sets. At least 4 individuals. They he RD the cabin door smash open. Shouts. The scrape of furniture being overturned. A voice, Shah RP and authoritative. Papers are here. Lamp is RM, he was here recently. CRCH the property. He can't have gone FAR. Amori footsteps. The crunch of boots circling the cabin. Reed pressed his back against the woodshed wall. Keller did the same. They held their breath. The footsteps passed within 10 feet of the woodshed door. A flashlight beam played across the cracks in the walls. Reed watched the light move, a slow, deliberate sweep. It paused at the door. Then it moved on. The team reassembled at the cabin. The leader's voice came through clear RLY. No sign of him outside. But the paperwork is legit. These are the original manifests. The Secretary will want to see these immediately. Pack them up. We're RTB. The sound of paper being shuffled. A zipper. The slam of a vehicle door. Engines STA rooting. Vehicles pulling away. The drone whine faded into the distance. REID counted to 100 before he moved. He pushed open the woodshed door. The cold air rushed in. The night was quiet again, the STARS clear and unblinking above. He walked to the cabin. Keller followed. The cabin was a wreck. Chairs overturned. Drawers pulled out. The table was the manifests were gone. The lamp lay shattered on the floor, its glass Shah RDS catching the moonlight. REID crossed to the mantelpiece. The photograph of Cole was still there. He picked it up, turned it over. On the back, in faded ink, was a number. A phone number. He had not noticed it before. Cole had planted it. A failsafe. REID pulled out the satchel phone. He dialed the number. It rang 3 times. Then a click. A voice, low and calculated. Reed. I was hoping you'd find that. Cole, Reed said. Your manifests are gone. The Secretary has them now. I know, Cole said. That was the plan. The manifests on the table were duplicates. Not the originals. The originals are in a safe deposit box under a different name. I left them for you. But the duplicates were perfect. They had everything the Secretary would need to believe he had contained the leak. He'll destroy them. He'll think the threat is neutralized. And he'll go through with the press conference tomorrow morning, confident that he has buried the truth. Reed's hand tightened on the phone. Then I have a window. A na RROW1. Very na RROW, Cole agreed. The press conference is at 9 a.m. Eastern. He's already sent the EMBA Rigode story to the major outlets. They think they're getting an exclusive on the Kandahar investigation. They don't know that the real story is about the Secretary himself. You need to get to Washington before that conference. You need to be there, in the room, with the original manifests. And you need to do exactly what you did tonight. Walk to the podium. Pull out the evidence. And watch him fall. Reid looked at the photograph in his hand. The younger version of himself, standing next to a general who had become a ghost. A ghost who was still fighting that. I don't have a plane, Reid said. I don't have a ride. I'm in the middle of nowhere with no transport and a team of federal agents combing the area. You have Keller, Cole said. And Keller has a contact. A helicopter pilot who owes me a favor. He'll pick you up at a landing zone 2 miles east of the cabin. You have 45 minutes to get there. Move now. The line went dead. Reid turned to Keller. She was already at the door, her eyes adjusted to the darkness, her hand on the frame. 2 miles east, she said. Through the trees. No path. We make our own. Reid nodded. He slipped the photograph into his pocket, next to the folded letter from Torres. He had 2 pieces of paper now. 2 reminders of why he was doing this. He picked up the satchel phone and followed Keller out the door. The walk was brutal. The ground was uneven, covered in fallen branches and frozen patches of mud. The trees were dense, their branches reaching out like grasping hands. Reid followed Keller's lead, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of pursuit. The drones were gone, but the agents had left a trail. A trail that could be followed. They reached the landing zone with 2 minutes to spar. It was a clear ring, a small patch of level ground surrounded by tall pines. The helicopter came out of the east, its rotors a low thumping beat that grew louder with each second. It had no lights. No markings. It landed with a soft bounce, its skid settling into the frost. A man in a black flight suit leaned out the door. Get in. We have 80 minutes to Washington. The Secretary's team is already moving. They have roadblocks on every highway and air traffic control on alert for unregistered flights. We're going to fly low. No radar, no transponder. It's going to be a rough ride. Reid climbed into the helicopter. Keller followed. The door slammed shut. The pilot pulled on the collective, and the aircraft rose into the night sky. The clear ring fell away. The trees became a RKCARPET below. The pilot banked RPLY, leveled out, and pushed the throttle forward. The flight was turbulent. The helicopter bumped and shimmied through the night air, its rotors a constant thrum that vibrated through Reid's jaw. He read out the window. The ground below was a blur of darkness and occasional lights. Small towns. Highways. The glow of a city on the horizon. Keller sat opposite him, her face a mask of concentration. Her hands were clasped in her lap. She was not a woman who spoke unnecessarily. Reid appreciated that. He had spent too many years listening to people who used words to hide their meaning. The pilot spoke over the headset. We're 20 minutes out. I'm putting US down on the roof of the old post office building. It's abandoned. There's a staircase that leads to the street. The press conference is at the National Press Club, 4 blocks from your landing point. You have a window of exactly 7 minutes to get from the roof to the podium. The Secretary's security will be tight. They'll be screening everyone. But the press club has a service entrance. A disgruntled janitor owes me a debt. He'll let you in. Reid nodded. He did not ask who the janitor was. He did not ask how the pilot knew him. Trust was a luxury he could not afford. But he had come this far. The plan was in motion. The helicopter descended toward the roof of the old post office. The building was a historic relic, its facade crumbling, its windows ried up. The roof was flat and covered in gravel. The helicopter settled onto it with a soft thud. The rotors slowed. The pilot pointed toward a door in the FAR corner. That staircase. Take it to the ground floor. Exit through the alley. The janitor will be at the service entrance of the press club. He's a short man with a bald head. He'll expect you. Go now. Reid slid out of the helicopter. The gravel crunched under his boots. The cold air hit him again, Shah RP and Reva riding. He ran toward the door. Keller followed. They pushed through the door and into the staircase. The concrete steps were dusty and uneven. Their footsteps echoed in the ROW space. They descended 3 flights, passed through a lobby that had been stripped of everything except pigeon droppings and broken glass, and emerged into a dark alley. The city was awake. The streets were dimly lit, but Reid could hear the distant rumble of traffic. The National Press Club was a grand building with a neoclassical facade, its windows blazing with light. The service entrance was at the back, a small metal door that opened onto a loading dock. The janitor was there. A short, bald man with a haggard face. He had a key in his hand. He looked at Reid with narrowed eyes. That you're late, he said. The press conference is about to start, the secretary is already at the podium. He's taking questions. You need to move fast. REID took the key. He pushed open the service door. The interior was a maze of corridors and utility pipes. He followed the janitor's directions, turning left at the boiler room, right at the laundry chute, through a pair of double doors that led to the backstage area. The press conference was happening in the main hall. He could hear the murmur of the crowd, the click of cameras, the smooth, confident tone of the secretary's voice. The investigation into the Kandahar incident has been reopened, the secretary was saying. We will leave no stone unturned. Those responsible will be held accountable. Justice will be served. REID stopped behind the curtain. He could see the secretary through the gap. A tall, imposing figure with graying hair and a jaw that could cut glass. He was the perfect picture of authority. The cameras loved him. The press loved him. The public loved him. REID reached into his pocket. He pulled out the folded letter from Torres. He pressed it against his chest. He took a breath. Then he stepped through the curtain. The lights hit him like a physical blow. The crowd gasped. The secretary stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened. Reid walked toward the podium. His steps were measured. Deliberate. He did not rush. He did not run. The security guards moved to intercept, but the secretary raised a hand. He wanted to watch. He wanted to see what Reid would do. REID stopped at the podium. He looked at the secretary, the man who had orchestrated the conspiracy. The man who had laundered $800 million Rs. The man who had buried 18 soldiers and called it a mistake. That Mr. Secretary, Reid said. I have a few questions for you. The Secretary of Defense, Richard Hayes, STA read at Reid with the cold, measured gaze of a man who had spent decades learning how to kill with a look. He was 62, with a lean build and graying hair that had been cut into a precise, unforgiving shape. His suit was Italian, his tie was silk, and his hands, resting on the podium, were completely still. He was not a man who sta riled easily. But the appearance of John Reid, from behind the curtain, had cracked that composure for a single, fractured second. Mr. Reid, Hayes said, his voice recovering its smooth baritone. This is unexpected. I was under the impression you had left the city. The press was told you were unavailable for comment. REID did not respond to the pleasantries. He held up the folded letter from Torres. The cameras clicked and whirred, capturing every angle. The room was a mix of journalists, security personnel, and a few straggling civilians who had been invited as filler. Reid's eyes moved over them, registering faces, positions, potential threats. He had no weapon. He had only the truth. And the truth, in this room, was a weapon. I'm not here to comment, Reid said. I'm here to correct the record. The statement you just made, the reopening of the Kandahar investigation, is FARCE. You are not investigating the conspiracy. You are burying it. A collective inhale from the press. The Secretary's smile tightened, but did not disappear. He was a master of the public performance. He had survived 3 administrations, 2 congressional investigations, and a scandal that had destroyed 3 generals. He would not be undone by a man in a wrinkled suit. Mr. Reid, I understand your emotions are running high. You have been through an ordeal tonight. But I must ask you to step back. This is an official press conference. I will be happy to meet with you privately after WARD. REID stepped closer to the podium. The security guards moved forward, but Hayes raised his hand again. He wanted to play this out. He wanted to control the narrative. He wanted to make Reid look like a desperate, broken man. I don't want a private meeting, Reid said. I want the room. I want the cameras. I want the public to know what you did. The $2 million RS in the offshore account, that was a test. A test to see if the laundry network could handle a LARGE transaction without setting off a la RMS. It passed. So you expanded the operation. Drugs. Weapons. Human trafficking. All run through a network of false charities, with the profits flowing directly into the Pentagon's black budget. $800 million RS. That's the real number. The words landed like a sledgehammer. The press room erupted. Journalists shouted questions over each other. Camera flashes strobed. The Secretary's smile finally cracked, replaced by a flat, dangerous expression that is a lie, Hayes said. A fabrication. You have no evidence. REID reached into his jacket. The security guards tensed. But he pulled out only a small, folded sheet of paper. He unfolded it and laid it on the podium. It was a photocopy of the original safe deposit box receipt. The one Cole had mentioned. The one with the original manifests. I have the evidence, Reid said. The original manifests. The complete logs. The transactions. The signatures. Every single document that traces the money from the drug shipments to the charities to the black budget. And at the top of every single page, there is a name. Your name. Approved by your hand. Signed with your initials. Hayes STA read at the paper. His face was a mask of stillness, but his eyes moved, tracking the letters, the numbers, the format. He recognized the documentation. He had seen it before. He had ordered it destroyed. Those are forgeries, he said. Anyone with access to a printer and a scanner could have produced them. Then explain the dates, Reid said. Explain the timestamps. Explain the electronic signatures that match your security code. The same code that unlocked your personal safe. The same code that logged into the satellite transmission system at 3:14 a.m. the morning of the Kandahar ambush. You can't forge a digital trail. And I have the entire trail, from the first transaction to the last. I have copy after copy. I have servers in 3 different countries. I have a timed release set for 10 a.m. this morning, if I don't cancel it. And I have no intention of canceling it. The room went silent. The cameras focused on Hayes. The secretary stood frozen, his hands gripping the podium, his knuckles white. The janitor had told Reid that Hayes was a man who played chess. But Reid had not come to play chess. He had come to overturn the BOA RD. Hayes leaned forward RD, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial rumble. You are making a mistake, Reid. A very serious one. You have no idea what you are dealing with. This is not about money. This is not about drugs. This is about national security. The operation I oversaw was not a criminal enterprise. It was a covert funding mechanism for black site operations that you were never clear-read to know about. The money did not go to private accounts. It went to operations that kept this country safe. Operations that saved thousands of lives. Operations that you, in your arrogance, are about to expose to the public. Reid did not flinch. He had expected this defense. The national security CARD, the oldest trick in the book. A shield of classified language behind which corruption could flourish unchecked. If that were true, Reid said, then the operations would have been documented in the classified budget. But they weren't. Because they never existed. The black budget you refer to is a construct. A fiction. A scapegoat for your own greed. The $800 million RS did not go to black sites. It went to shell companies. To offshore accounts. To private yachts. To the penthouse apartment in Singapore that you purchased under your wife's maiden name. Hayes flinched. It was a micro-expression, a tiny twitch in his left cheek, but Reid caught it. The apartment in Singapore was not public knowledge. Reid had read about it from the manifests. The paperwork had been buried deep in the footnotes, a single transaction that led to a real estate holding company, which led to a trust, which led to the secretary's wife. The chain was complex, but not impenetrable. That you don't know what you're talking about, Hayes said, but his voice had lost its edge. It was a blunted instrument now, unable to cut. I know enough, Reid said. I know about the safe deposit box in Geneva. I know about the transfer of $47.3 million RS to a private foundation in the Cayman Islands. I know about the meeting you had with the Panamanian banker at the Ritz-Carlton in Berlin. I know that your personal security code was used to access the satellite logs the night of the Kandahar ambush. And I know that Sergeant Torres, your brother-in-law, was murdered because he knew the truth. He turned to the press. The words were pouring out of him now, a river that had been dammed for 6 years. You have been lied to. Not just by Vance. Not just by the general. By the man who stands before you, the man who claims to be the guardian of this nation. He is the architect. He is the source. He is the reason 18 men died in a valley that should have been safe. And he will not stop until every single person who knows the truth is buried. The press room was a maelstrom. Reporters were on their feet, shouting questions. Security guards were hesitating, unsure of whether to intervene. The secretary stood at the podium, his hands now shaking, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles in his neck were corded with strain. Hayes reached for the microphone. He was going to speak. He was going to deny everything. But before his fingers could close around the metal, a figure emerged from the side of the room. A man in a dark suit, carrying a folder. He walked directly to the podium and leaned into Hayes' ear. The secretary's face changed. Not gradually, but instantly. The color drained from his cheeks. His eyes widened. His grip on the podium slackened. He read at the folder as if it were a live grenade. Reid watched the transformation. He did not know who the man was, but he could guess. The figure was wearing the insignia of the Department of Justice. A federal prosecutor. The folder contained something that had just made Hayes' defenses collapse. The man spoke softly, but the room was so silent that every word was audible. Mr. Secretary. A federal warrant has been issued for your arrest. Charges include conspiracy, money laundering, and aiding and abetting the enemy during wartime. You are to be taken into custody immediately. Hayes read at the prosecutor. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The man who had commanded the world's most powerful military was reduced to a speechless figure in a perfectly pressed suit. The cameras captured every frame. The press held their breath. Reid stepped back from the podium. He had done his part, the evidence was out. The warrant was executed. The secretary was finished. But he did not feel triumph. He felt the cold, hollow emptiness of a man who had spent 6 years living for a single moment, and now the moment had arrived, and there was nothing left but the aftermath. Hayes turned to Reid. His eyes were wide, almost begging. "Reid. Stop this. I can fix this. I can make it right. The money, I'll return it. I'll cooperate. I'll testify. Just tell them to back off." Reid looked at him. The man who had buried his reputation. The man who had ordered the death of 18 soldiers. The man who had laundered $800 million Rs. "And now, the man who was begging that you had your chance," Reid said. "You had 6 Rs. You could have come forward, you could have told the truth. But you didn't. You buried it. You buried Torres. You buried the 18 men. And you buried me. Now the burial is over." He turned away. He walked toward the exit. The press SWA met around him, shouting questions, blocking his path. He pushed through them with the same deliberate economy he had used in the ballroom. He was not running. He was not hiding. He was leaving. Outside, the streets were crowded with onlookers. The news had spread. The Secretary of Defense had been arrested in the middle of a press conference. The chaos was tangible, a visible pressure in the air. Reid walked past the crowd, his eyes forward, his hands in his pockets. Keller was waiting by the curb in a different car, a silver sedan with tinted windows. She opened the door. Reid slid inside. The car pulled away before the door was fully closed. "The warrant was faster than I expected," Keller said. The prosecutor had been sitting on it for hours. He was waiting for the press conference to begin. He wanted the cameras there. He wanted the public to see the arrest. Reid nodded. He leaned back in the seat. The exhaustion was overwhelming now, a tidal wave that had finally crested. His eyes were heavy. His muscles ached. But his mind was still racing. "What happens next?" he asked. Keller shook her head. "That depends. The Secretary's arrest is only the first domino. There are dozens of others. The charities. The shell companies. The bankers. The operatives. They'll all fall. But it will take months, maybe years. And in the meantime, there will be retaliation. People who lost money. People who lost power. People who are now facing prison time. They will want revenge. And they will look for you." REID'S read out the window. The city was a blur of lights and shadows. He had destroyed the Secretary, he had exposed the conspiracy. He had vindicated the 18 men. But he had also made enemies of everyone who had profited from the system. The system was not a single man. It was a network. And networks, once threatened, did not surrender. They struck back. "I don't see about the retaliation," Reid said. "I see about my son. Ma-RK. Is he safe?" Keller paused. The car turned a corner, and the streetlights played across her face. "We don't know. The Secretary's office had him under surveillance. But the surveillance team was pulled back when the press conference route. He's been on his own for the last hour. We have no contact." Reid's stomach tightened. He had assumed that once the Secretary was arrested, the threat to Ma-RK would disappear, but the system was not rational. It was reactive. And reactive systems, cornered, did desperate things. "Take me to him," Reid said. "I don't see where he is. I don't see how we find him. Take me to my son." Keller looked at him. For the first time, her composure cracked. "Reid. If we go to him, we lead them to him. They're watching everyone you've ever known. They're waiting for you to make a mistake. Going to your son is a mistake. He's safer if you stay away. REID slammed his palm against the dashboard. The CAR shook. The driver flinched. Reed's voice was a low, rough gravel. He is my son. He is the only thing I have left. I lost everything else. My career. My reputation. My name. I am not losing him. Take me to him, or I will get out of this CAR and find him myself. Keller studied him for a long moment. The CAR hummed along the empty street. Finally, she nodded. He's at his appartement. In Georgetown. But Reed, the appartement is under surveillance. Not official surveillance. The other kind. The kind that doesn't wear badges. There are two men in a black sedan across the street. They've been there for 3 hours. They're waiting for you. REID leaned back. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, burning focus. Then we don't go to the appartement. We draw them out. We make them come to us. Keller raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? REID reached into his pocket and pulled out the satchel phone. He dialed the number he had memorized from the photograph. Cole's number. It rang twice, then clicked. Cole, Reed said. I need a favor. A big one. I need you to make a phone call. I need you to tell the surveillance team that I'm at the Georgetown appartement. I need you to tell them that I'm here now. And I need you to tell them that I'm alone. The line was silent for a moment. Then Cole's voice, crackling and distant. Reed. That's suicide. They'll SWARM the place. They'll kill you on sight. Let them SWARM, Reed said. Let them come. Because I won't be there. I'll be across the street, watching. And when they're inside, searching for me, I'll walk in the front door, past them, and get my son out. They'll never see me coming. Cole laughed. A dark, rattling laugh. You always did have a flair for the dramatic. Fine. I'll make the call. But Reed, this is the last favor. After this, you're on your own. The line went dead. Reed turned to Keller. Drive me to Georgetown. But stop 3 blocks away. I'll walk the rest. Keller nodded. The CAR accelerated. The city lights blurred. Reed read out the window, his hand pressed against the letter in his pocket. Torres. Cole. The 18 men. They were all part of this. And now, so was RK. The cycle of burial and resurrection was not over. It was only beginning. The silver sedan pulled to the curb 3 blocks from RK Reed's appartement building in Georgetown. The street was lined with old brick townhouses, their windows dark at this hour. A single streetlight flickered at the corner, casting a pulsing orange glow on the wet sidewalk. Rain had fallen an hour earlier, and the asphalt glistened like polished slate. Reed stepped out of the CAR, he did not look back at Keller. He simply walked, his boots making a soft scuffing sound on the pavement. He had turned his jacket inside out, reversing the dark fabric to a duller, less recognizable gray. He had pulled his collar up and tucked his chin into the fabric. In the dim light, he was just another shape in the night. He walked the 3 blocks with deliberate slowness. His eyes scanned the street, the doorways, the rooftops. The surveillance team would be in position by now. Cole's call would have triggered them. They would be watching the front of the appartement building, expecting Reed to walk through the door. They would not be watching the alley. Reed turned left at the second corner, entering a narrow passage between 2 buildings. The alley was dark, smelling of dumpsters and damp cardboard. He moved silently, his boots finding the dry patches of concrete. The building's RER entrance was a rusted metal door with a keypad. RK had given him the code 6 years ago, before everything fell apart, Reid had never forgotten it. He punched in the code. A green light flashed. The lock clicked. He pushed the door open and slipped inside. The hallway was tight, lined with old pipes and electrical meters. The air smelled of dust and old heating oil. Reid climbed the stairs to the third floor, his footsteps soft, his breath controlled. He paused at the landing and listened. The building was quiet. No footsteps. No voices. The surveillance team was outside, waiting for a man who wasn't coming. He reached the door to Marquez apartment. He raised his fist and knocked 3 times. A pause. 2 more knocks. The pattern they had used when Marquez was a child, a secret signal in the middle of the night. A pause. Then the door opened a crack. A single eye, wide with fear, peered out. Father, Marquez's voice was a whisper, strained, breaking. Let me in, Reid said. Now. The door swung open. Marquez stepped back, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Anger. Relief. Confusion. Suspicion. He was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed. He had not slept. He had not eaten. The apartment behind him was dark except for the glow of a single lamp in the corner. What are you doing here? Marquez said, his voice rising. Everyone is looking for you. The news is covering nothing else. The secretary was arrested. Vance is in custody. The entire Pentagon is in meltdown. And you're standing in my apartment. Reid stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He locked it. He turned to his son and studied his face. The disgust he had seen in the ballroom was still there, but it was now mingled with something else. Doubt. The beginnings of understanding. We don't have much time, Reid said. There is a surveillance team outside. They're waiting for me. They think I'm in the building, but they don't know where. I have a small window before they check the perimeter and find the alley door. We need to leave. Now. Marquez stood his ground. His jaw was clenched. His hands were balled into fists at his sides. Leave to where? I've been watching the news. I've seen the evidence. I know what you did. I know what you said. But I don't know who you are. 6 years. 6 years of nothing. No phone calls. No letters. No explanations. Just silence. And then you walk into that ceremony and destroy 2 generals and the Secretary of Defense. Who are you? Reid looked at his son. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and unforgiving. He had expected this. He had prepared for it. But preparation did not ease the pain. I am the same man who taught you to ride a bike, Reid said. The same man who took you fishing on the Potomac. The same man who tucked you in at night and told you that the truth was the only thing worth dying for. I never stopped being that man. I was just forced to hide him. Marquez shook his head. That's not an answer. That's a speech. I want the truth. The real truth. Not the version you gave to the cameras. Reid took a step closer. His voice dropped. The truth is that I was framed. The truth is that I let myself be framed so I could gather evidence against the men who buried 18 soldiers. The truth is that I couldn't tell you because if I had, the surveillance teams would have found me. They would have killed me. And they would have killed you too. You were safer not knowing. Marquez's fists unclenched. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the anger in his eyes softened. But the suspicion remained. A wound that would not heal in a single conversation. They watched me, Marquez said. For 6 years, I thought I was being paranoid. I thought I was imagining the same CAR on the street, the same man in the coffee shop. But I wasn't imagining it. Were they waiting for you to come to me? Yes, Reid said. And they're still waiting. Which is why we need to leave. He crossed to the window. He pulled the curtain back a fraction of an inch and peered out. The black sedan was still there, parked across the street, its engine off, its interior dark. Two figures sat inside, visible only as silhouettes. They were patient. They were trained. They would wait all night if they had to. We go out the back, Reid said. Through the basement. There's a tunnel that connects to the next building. I used it once, years ago. It's still passable. We come up 3 blocks away, and we disappear into the city. Mark grabbed a jacket from the back of a chair. He slipped it on with quick, frustrated movements. He did not argue. He did not ask more questions. He was a lawyer, trained to evaluate evidence and make decisions. The evidence in front of him was clear. His father was not the enemy. The men outside were. They exited through the apartment's back door, into a service staircase that led down to the basement. The stairs were concrete, unpainted, the walls smelling of damp plaster. Reid led the way, his hand on the railing, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. Mark followed closely, his breath shallow and quick. The basement was a maze of furnaces, water heaters, and storage lockers. Reid moved through them with the confidence of a man who had studied the building's blueprints. He stopped at a metal door in the far corner, its paint peeling, its hinges rusted. He gripped the handle and pulled. The door opened with a low groan. Beyond the door was a tunnel. Narrow, cold, the walls lined with old brick. The ceiling was low, forcing Reid to duck. The floor was packed dirt, damp with seepage. A single, faint glow of light came from the other end. Through here, Reid said. Stay close. And don't touch the walls. Thy walked in silence. The tunnel twisted and turned, following the old foundations of the buildings above. The sound of their footsteps was muffled by the dirt. The air grew colder, tasting of stone and age. Reid counted his steps. 200. 300. 400. At 500, the tunnel ended in another metal door. He pushed it open. The door led into the basement of an abandoned laundromat. The machines were covered in dust, their coins long since rusted into the slots. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, its filament glowing weakly. Reid moved to the front window. He peered through the filthy glass. The street outside was empty. The surveillance team was still watching Mark's building, 3 blocks away. They had no idea their target had already moved. He turned to Mark. We're clear, but we have to keep moving. I have a contact. A place we can stay. It's not permanent, but it will give us time. Mark nodded. His face was pale, but his eyes had redeemed. The fear was still there, but it was now underlined with determination. He was a Reid. He had the same jaw, the same set of the shoulders. He had his father's blood, for better or worse. They exited through the back of the laundromat, into an alley that ran between 2 dark buildings. The night air was sharp and clean. The city hummed in the distance, a low, indistinct thrum. Reid pulled out the satchel phone. He scrolled through the contacts, stopping on a number that had no name, only a series of numbers. He pressed dial. The line rang 3 times. A click. A voice, deep and gravelly. Reid. I heard about the secretary. I heard about the press conference. You're a hard man to find. I need a place, Reid said. A safe place. For 2 people. The voice paused. The silence stretched for a full 5 seconds. Then the reply came. I have a warehouse in the industrial district. It's not pretty. But it's off the grid. No cameras. No records. I'll send you the address. There's a back entry. Use the code on the door. It's 47-23-81. After that, don't contact me until you're ready. The line went dead. Reid slid the phone back into his pocket. He turned to Ma RK, who was standing with his hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, his breath fogging in the cold air. We have a way, Reid said. It's not much. But it's something. MARK looked at him. The anger had not fully disappeared. But it had receded, replaced by a cautious curiosity. Who are you really? Not the public version. Not the version you gave the press. The real version. REID looked at his son. The words were there, on the tip of his tongue. The full story. The 6 years of hiding. The lonely nights. The close calls. The moments he had almost given up. But this was not the time for stories. This was the time for action. The real version, Reid said, is that I am a man who made a promise to a dying soldier. A promise to tell the truth. And I am a man who will do anything to keep that promise. Including sacrificing everything I had. Including you. MARK flinched at the last words. But he did not look away. He held his father's gaze. I want to understand. I need to understand. But not now. Now we need to survive. REID nodded. He put a hand on his son's shoulder. The gesture was brief, but it carried the weight of 6 years of silence. Then he turned and led the way into the darkness. The Wari house was a huge, cavernous structure made of rusted corrugated steel. Its roof was high and arched, its floor a sweeping expanse of cracked concrete. Pallets of unknown goods were stacked in rows, covered in tar and dust. A single office loft sat in the FAR corner, its windows to RK.REID punched the code into the back door. The lock clicked. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The smell of oil, metal, and old wood filled his nostrils. It was a familiar smell. The smell of places where men hid and planned and waited. Ma RK followed him in. The door closed with a heavy thud, sealing them in darkness. Reid reached for a wall switch and flipped it. A series of fluorescent tubes flickered to life, casting a HRSH, pallid light over the interior. Thui walked tower RD the office loft. The stairs were metal, their treads rusted and uneven. The office itself was small, containing only a desk, 2 chairs, and a cot in the corner. The windows were covered in newsprint, blocking any view of the outside. REID sat in one of the chairs. The leather creaked under his weight. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. The exhaustion was a living thing now, a pressure that pushed against his skull. But he could not sleep. Not yet. There was still work to do. Ma RK sat opposite him. He read at his father with a long, unblinking gaze. The questions were still there, unasked. But the anger had faded, replaced by something stranger. A kind of acceptance. A recognition that the man in front of him was not a stranger. He was the same man. Just buried. Just waiting. REID opened his eyes. He looked at his son. The room was quiet. The city hummed outside, distant and ring. But inside the Wari house, in the cold light of the fluorescent tubes, a tentative connection had been made. It was fragile. It was untested. But it was there. We stay here for now, Reid said. We rest. We plan. And then we finish this. MARK nodded. He did not ask what this was. He already knew. The 18 men. The $800 million RS. The network that still reached into the highest corners of power. It was not over. It would never be over. Not until every last piece of the puzzle was destroyed. The Wari house was cold, but the office loft had a small space heater that hummed in the corner, its elements glowing orange. Reid sat at the desk, the spread of documents from the safe deposit box arrayed before him. The original manifests. The signatures. The dates. Each page was a thread in a web that spanned continents. Ma-R-K sat on the cot, his back against the wall, his knees drawn up to his chest. He had not spoken for an hour. The initial rush of the escape had faded, leaving behind the heavy silence of two men who had spent 6 years RSAPART and did not know how to bridge the distance. REID broke the quiet first. I need you to look at something. He slid a single sheet across the desk. Ma-R-K rose and walked over, his eyes scanning the document. It was a financial statement, dense with numbers and account codes. But one line had been highlighted in yellow. Ma-R-K. A transfer of $12.7 million Rs from a charity registered in Delaware RE to a private foundation in Switzerland. What am I looking at? Ma-R-K asked. The loophole, Reid said. The Delaware RE charity was a front. The Swiss foundation was the receiving end. But the money didn't stop there. It was transferred again, to a third account in Singapore. And from Singapore, it was wired to a fourth account in the Cayman Islands. 4 layers. Each one designed to obscure the origin. Each one requiring a different signatory. Ma-R-K studied the document. His finger traced the highlighted line. So the secretary wasn't the only one signing off. No, Reid said. There were 4 signatories. The secretary was the first. The second was the Treasury Under-Secretary, the third was a private banker in Geneva. The fourth was a man who has never been named in any public document. But I know who he is. He's the one who built the network. The architect. Ma-R-K looked up. His eyes were sharp, alert. The lawyer in him was now fully engaged. Who is Ichi? Reid leaned back in the chair. The leather creaked. He rubbed his temples with his fingertips. The name had been burned into his memory the moment he had seen it in the manifests. His name is Alexander Voss. He's a private consultant. Former CIA, he ran OFF the books operations for 3 administrations. He knows where the bodies are reburied because he buried most of them. The secretary was the political cover. Vance was the field operator. But Voss was the brains. He designed the money laundering scheme. He set up the shell companies. He chose the charities. He recruited the signatories. Without Voss, the conspiracy would have collapsed within a year. Ma-R-K set the document back on the desk. And where is Voss now? That's the problem, Reid said. He disappeared 2 days before the gala. His apartment is empty. His office is cleaned out. His phone lines are dead. He knew the ceremony was coming. He knew Vance was going to expose me. But he didn't know that I had the manifests. He thought he was safe. Now he's running. The heater clicked. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Ma-R-K read at his father, his face unreadable. So we have to find him, Ma-R-K said. Before he destroys the evidence. Before he goes deeper underground. Reid nodded. Exactly. But finding him is not the real challenge. The real challenge is catching him in public. He's a ghost. He doesn't use credit cards, he doesn't fly commercial. He doesn't own property under his own name. The only way to pin him down is to force him out of hiding. Ma-R-K slid into the chair opposite the desk. How do we do that? Reid pulled out the satchel phone. He scrolled to a contact Ma-R-K only with a single initial. J. The call rang once, then a click. Reid, the voice said. I was wondering when you'd call. Jacobs, Reid said. I need your help. I need to find Alexander Voss. The line was silent for a long moment. Then Jacobs spoke, his voice flat and ca-refull. Voss is a hard man to track. He owes favors. He has resources. He's been doing this for 30 years. And you've been doing it for 40, Reid said. You were his handler. You know his patterns. You know his safe houses. You know his backup plans. I need you to tell me where he would go. Another pause. The silence stretched. Reid could hear the faint crackle of the distant connection. Finally, Jacob spoke. Voss has a property in the Outer Banks. A fishing cabin. Nothing fancy. But it's off the grid. No phone. No power. He uses it for emergencies. The address is 47, Coastal Road. But Reid, he won't be alone. He has a security team. Ex Milita Re, 3 men. Heavily armed. If you go there, you're walking into a trap. REID wrote the address on the margin of a manifest. Then I'll bring my own team. He ended the call. He looked at RK. His son's face was paler than before, but his eyes were steadied. We can't do this alone, RK said. 3 armed men. A former CIA operative. We need backup. REID reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded letter from Torres. He held it for a moment, then placed it on the desk. I have backup. 2 men. Old platoon. They've been waiting for a call. They're in the area. I can reach them within an hour. Marksta read at the letter. You've been planning this for years. Every step, Reid said. I knew that exposing Vance was only the first move. I knew the secretary was the second. But Voss was always the endgame. Without him, the conspiracy collapses. With him, IT can rebuild. He knows everything. The names. The accounts. The contacts. He can start over from scratch. We have to stop him before he does. RK rose from the chair. His movements were quick, decisive. Then let's stop him. But I'm coming with you. REID looked at his son. The same determined jaw. The same fierce eyes. He had raised a man who would not stay behind. The thought was both a pride and a fear. It's dangerous, Reid said. They won't hesitate to shoot. I know, RK said. But I didn't hide for 6 years. I didn't wait. I didn't know the truth. But now I know. And I'm not going to walk away from it. REID studied his son for a long moment. Then he nodded. He reached for the satchel phone and dialed a second number. This time, the call was answered on the first ring. It's Reid, he said. I need you in Jenkins. We have a RGT. Coastal Road. Outer Banks. Voss is there. 3-man security team. We move in 2 hours. The voice on the other end was rough, unforgiving. We'll be there. We're bringing Hayar. Where do we meet? REID gave the address of the Wari house. He ended the call and turned to RK. 2 hours. Hayar up. We're going to need everything we can. CARRY. THEY worked in silence. Reid pulled open a locker in the corner of the office, revealing a small arsenal. 2 pistols. A rifle. Extra magazines. A tactical vest. Flashlights. Night vision goggles. He had been preparing for this moment for years, stockpiling weapons and equipment in safe houses across the country. RK watched his father move with practiced efficiency. The old man had not lost his skills. The hands that had once taught him to tie a fishing knot were now loading magazines with the same precise focus. That you did this before, RK said. In the military. Many times, Reid said without looking up. But never with my son. The words landed hard. RK did not respond. He picked up a pistol and hefted it, feeling the weight. He had never fired a weapon in combat. He had only been to a range once, with colleagues, a casual distraction. Now he was holding a weapon that might soon be pointed at a living target. "You don't have to shoot," Reid said. "You can stay back. Cover the exit. Be the eyes." Mark slid the pistol into his waistband. "I'll do what I have to do." 2 hours passed in a blur. The door to the Wari house opened, and 2 figures entered. Jenkins was tall, lanky, with a grey beard and eyes that had seen too much. The other, Smith, was stocky and bald, his face a map of old SCARS. They both CA-RIDE rifles and had the look of men who had not had a peaceful night in decades. REID greeted them with a nod. No handshakes. No pleasantries. They were not friends. They were soldiers who had a job to do. "The cabin is 3 miles inland from the coast," Reid said, tapping a map spread on the desk. "Heavy tree line on 3 sides. Open ground on the front. The security team will be positioned at the perimeter. We go in from the back. Through the trees. Silent approach. Take out the perimeter first. Then breach the cabin." Smith traced a line on the map with his finger. "There's a ravine here. Deep. Covers our approach. But if they have night vision, they'll see us coming." "They won't have night vision," Reid said. "Voss doesn't trust technology. He uses old-school methods. Watch towers. Listening posts. But if we move slow, move low, we can get within 50 yards before they detect us." Jenkins crossed his arms and "After we breach, what's the plan for VOSS?" REID tapped the map again. "We take him alive. He knows the full network. The names of everyone involved. He can testify. Without him, we have puzzle pieces without a picture. He's the key." Mark listened in silence. The words were cold, clinical. Plans of men who had done this many times before. But he could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken knowledge that things often went wrong. They loaded into a black van, its interior stripped of seats, replaced with AR and weapons. The drive was long, 3 hours through the RK highways and winding coastal roads. Reid sat in the back, his eyes closed, his breath even. He was not sleeping. He was meditating. A technique he had learned in the service. A way to center the mind before the storm. The van stopped at the edge of a tree line. The coastal air was salt as HARP, CA-ring the sound of distant waves. Reid stepped out. The night was dark, the moon thin and hidden behind clouds. Perfect conditions. He motioned for the others to follow. They moved through the trees in single file, their footsteps muffled by pine needles and damp earth. The cabin read through the gaps in the foliage. A small structure with a single light glowing in the window. A figure moved past the glass. Then another. Reid raised a fist. The team stopped. He kneeled, pulling out the night vision goggles. The world turned green and sharp. He scanned the perimeter. 2 men at the front. 1 at the side. The third was inside with Voss. He turned to the others and made a series of hand signals. Jenkins nodded and moved left. Smith moved right. Reid tapped Mark on the shoulder and pointed toward the REAR of the cabin. They moved. The sound of their approach was covered by the rustle of leaves and the distant crash of the ocean. Reid moved low, his rifle at the ready. The perimeter guard at the side was face away, sta ring into the darkness. A mistake. Reid closed the distance in 3 seconds. His ARM snapped around the guard's neck. A quick, precise movement. The guard dropped, unconscious. Smith had taken the front guard with a similar efficiency. Jenkins was already positioned at the cabin door. Reid motioned for Mark to stay back, to cover the exit. REID kicked the door open. The light blazed out. Inside, Alexander Voss sat at a table, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He was a slim man with graying hair and eyes that were too calm. Two security men stood behind him, their weapons raised. Reid, Voss said. I was wondering when you'd show up. I've been waiting. REID did not lower his rifle. You're under arrest, Voss. For conspiracy. For murder. For the laundering of $800 million Rs. Voss took a sip of whiskey. His eyes never left Reid's. And who is going to arrest me? You're a fugitive. You're wanted by the very government you claim to serve. If you shoot me, you're a murderer. If you take me in, they'll lock you up alongside me. REID stepped forward. I'll take that chance. The security men raised their weapons. But before they could fire, a shot rang out from the darkness outside. One of the men staggered, his shoulder exploding in a spray of blood. Smith had taken the shot from the trees. The second man hesitated, and Reid moved. He crossed the distance in 2 steps, disarming the man with a swift, crushing blow to the wrist. The weapon clattered to the floor. Voss stood. His whiskey glass was still in his hand. His face was unreadable. You've won this round, Reid. But you haven't won the war. The network is richer than you know. It spans 12 countries. It involves people you would never suspect. I am not the architect. I am a tool. And tools can be replaced. REID stepped closer. His rifle was leveled at Voss's chest. Then you're going to tell me who the real architect is. You're going to tell me every name. Every account. Every transaction. And you're going to do it in a courtroom, under oath. Voss sipped his whiskey. I'll do no such thing. I'd rather die in this cabin than spend the rest of my life in a federal prison. He raised the glass. Reid's finger tightened on the trigger. But he did not fire. He could not. Voss was worth more alive than dead. The whiskey glass was a taunt. A challenge. Jenkins entered the cabin, his rifle sweeping the room. Perimeter is clear. 2 down. 1 injured. Voss is the only one left. REID lowered his rifle. He walked to the table and sat down opposite Voss. The old operative read back at him with the same cold calm. You're going to talk, Reid said. Not because you want to. Because I will give you no other choice. VOSS set down the whiskey glass. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into Reid's. Then listen carefully. Because I'm only going to say this once. The real architect is not a man. It's a position. The secretary was the front. Vance was the operator. But the position behind them, the one that approved the budget, that oversaw the network, that gave the orders, that position is always filled. If you take down the current occupant, someone else will take the seat. The system is not a person. It's a machine. And machines cannot be killed. Reid read at him. The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. The system. The machine. The architect that was not a person. Then I'll destroy the machine, Reid said. One piece at a time. The cabin was quiet except for the drip of water from a cracked pipe in the corner. The security men were down. The perimeter was clear. Alexander Voss sat across from Reid, his whiskey glass empty, his eyes still seeing that disturbing calm. But the calm was cracking. Reid could see the micro-tremors in the man's fingers, the slight tension in his jaw. Reid placed the folded letter from Torres on the table. He pressed it flat with his palm. The system is a machine, he said. But machines have RTS. RTS can be removed. RTS can be broken. And when enough RTS are gone, the machine stops. VOSS leaned back in his chair. The wood creaked. You can't kill a position. You can only kill the people who occupy it. And there are always more people. Always more willing to take the seat. Then I'll keep killing them, Reid said. Until the seat is empty. Until no one will take it. Voss laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound, devoid of humor. That's not how this works. The seat is not a single chair. It's a network. A web. Even if you destroy every name I give you, the web will rebuild. It will grow back from the fragments. You can't burn it all down because you don't know where all the roots are. REID slid a second sheet across the table. A map. Not a geographical map, but a conceptual one. A diagram he had spent years constructing, based on fragments of information, hints from Cole, pieces from the manifests. Names. Accounts. Connections. Lines drawn between dots in a pattern that resembled a spider's web. This is my map, Reid said. I built it over 6 years. Every piece of evidence I found, every fragment I could salvage. There are holes. Gaps. Names I don't know. But the structure is clear. The money flows from the drug operations through the charities to the shell companies to the Pentagon's black budget. The secretary signed off at the highest level. The undersecretary managed the laundry. You built the system. And there is a single point where all the threads converge. A single node that controls everything. I don't know who occupies that node. But I know where it is. And I know that if I destroy it, the web collapses. Voss read at the map. His eyes moved slowly, tracing the lines, the names, the patterns. Reid watched him. The calm in Voss's eyes was faltering. A glimmer of something, respect, perhaps, or fear, flickered in their depths. You found the node, Voss said. After all these years. You found it. It was in the manifests, Reid said. Buried in the footnotes of the footnotes. A single reference to a code name. The Clea Ring House. A location. Not an address, but a general area. The eastern shore of Mar Island. A private estate. No public records. No title deeds. No tax filings. But the money trace lead to it. Every single line of the laundry network points to that one location. Voss licked his lips. His hand moved toward the whiskey glass, but it was empty. He set it down again. The Clea Ring House is not a person. It's a facility. A server farm, all the digital records are housed there. All the transactions are logged. All the secure communications pass through its firewalls. Destroy the facility, and the network has no memory. The names are gone. The accounts are gone. The connections are gone. But the physical structure is heavily guarried. Private security. Ex-military, they have orders to shoot on sight. Reid traced a line on the map with his finger. How many RDS? At least 12. Plus a perimeter defense system. Motion sensors. Cameras. Automated turrets. It's a fortress. REID leaned back. 12 RDS. A perimeter system. Automated turrets. The estate was a small compound, but it was heavily defended. A suicide mission for any small team. That you can't take it with 3 men, Voss said. Not even with your son and your 2 soldiers. You need a small army. And you don't have one. REID reached for the satchel phone. He dialed a number he had not called in years. The line rang 5 times. 6. 7. Then a click. General Reid, a voice said. I was wondering if you'd ever use that number. Director Martinez, Reid said. I need a favor. A big one. I need a team. 20 men. Heavy armament. Able to penetrate a fortified estate on the eastern shore of Mar Island. I need them in place within 4 hours. The line was silent. Reid could hear the faint static of the distant connection. Then Martinez spoke, his voice flat and unyielding. That's not a favor. That's a military operation. I can't authorize that without a written order from the Pentagon. The Pentagon is the target, Reid said. The Secretary is in custody. The Undersecretary is under investigation. The network is in chaos. The Clea Ring House is the last piece. Destroy it, and the conspiracy is decapitated. I'm not asking you to do it for me. I'm asking you to lend me the men. I'll lead the operation. I'll take full responsibility. Another long silence. Reid could imagine Martinez sitting in his office, weighing the risks, the political fallout, the possibility that this could be a trap. If I give you the men, Martinez said, and if this goes wrong, I will deny everything. I will say you forged the order. I will have you arrested for treason. Understood, Reid said. I expect nothing less. The men will be at the airfield in 2 hours. Do not call this number again. The line went dead. Reid slid the phone back into his pocket. He turned to Voss, whose face had gone pale. That you have contacts, Voss said. Contacts I didn't know about. I have contacts everywhere, Reid said. I spent 6 years building a network of my own. Not for power. For justice. Every general I saved. Every officer I helped. Every soldier I pulled out of a bad situation. I called in those debts. Now they're going to pay. Reid stood. He walked to the cabin door and looked out at the night. The trees were dark, the sky overcast. Ma-RK came up behind him. That you're going to lead them, Ma-RK said. The 20 men. I have to, Reid said. No one else knows the layout. No one else has studied the map. No one else can call the shots in real time. Mark stood beside his father. I'm coming too. Reid turned. His eyes were hard, but his voice was soft. Ma-RK. If I lose you on this, I will never forgive myself. If I stay behind, Ma-RK said, and you die, I will never forgive myself. We're in this together. That's what family does. Reid looked at his son. The words hit harder than anything Voss had said. He reached out and gripped Ma-RK's shoulder. A brief, firm squeeze. Stay close. Follow my orders. If I tell you to go, you go. No arguments. Mark nodded. No arguments. The 2-hour window shrank to 1. Reid, Ma-RK, Jenkins, and Smith loaded Voss into the black van. The old operative sat in the back, his hands cuffed, his eyes still trying to pierce the darkness. He was a broken tool now, but he was still dangerous. The airfield was a small, private strip carved out of the Mar Island countryside. A single hangar stood at its edge, its doors rolled back to reveal 2 black helicopters. 20 men in tactical gear stood in formation before them, their faces masked, their weapons at the ready. Reid walked toward them. He had no uniform. No insignia. He was a civilian in a worn jacket and faded jeans. But the men knew who he was. They had been told. They had been briefed. The target is a fortified estate, Reid said, his voice rang across the RMAC. 12 Remed RDS motion sensors. Cameras. Automated turrets. We go in from the east, where the tree line provides cover. We neutralize the perimeter defenses first. Then we breach the main structure. The objective is the server FARM in the basement. We destroy the HRD drives. All of them. No data leaves that building. The men listened in silence. They were professionals. They did not need cheers or inspirational speeches. They needed clear our orders. REID turned to the helicopters. Load up. We move in 10 minutes. The rotors sta route to were. The men filed into the aircraft, their boots clanking on the metal floors. Reid climbed into the lead helicopter. Ma RK followed. Jenkins and Smith took the second. The flight was short. 20 minutes of turbulent bumping over the Chesapeake Bay, the waters RK and unforgiving below. The estate appeared red as a cluster of lights on the shore, its perimeter marked by tall fences and watchtowers. The helicopters set down in a clear ring a half-mile from the RGT. The men deployed into the trees with silent efficiency. Reid led the way, his rifle up, his eyes scanning the darkness. The motion sensors would be active. They had to move fast. The first turret was taken out with a precise shot from Smith. The second fell to a credinated salvo. The perimeter GUA RDS were neutralized in a series of swift, silent movements. The team reached the main building within 10 minutes. REID kicked the door open. The interior was sterile, white, filled with the hum of servers. The basement was a cavernous space lined with racks of HRD drives, their lights blinking in rhythmic patterns. The data. The records. The evidence. Blow it, Reid ordered. The demolition team moved in. Explosives were planted on the support structures. The countdown began. REID turned to Ma RK. We're done. Time to go. THEY ran back through the building, their boots pounding on the concrete floors. The team was already extracting. The helicopters were spooling. The countdown reached single digits. THEY Clea read the perimeter just as the explosion ripped through the estate. A fireball rose into the night sky, illuminating the trees, the bay, the faces of the men who had done the impossible. Reid climbed into the helicopter. The door slammed shut. The aircraft rose into the darkness. Below, the estate was a pile of rubble and flame. VOSSSTA read out the window. His face was completely empty. The calm was gone. The resignation was gone. There was nothing left. You did it, he said. You destroyed the Clea Ring house. REID looked at him. Not the system. The system is a machine. But machines need memory. Without the data, the network is blind. And a blind network cannot repair itself. The helicopter flew on, the coastline falling away. Ma RK sat beside his father, his hand resting on the seat, his eyes fixed on the distant glow of the fire. The explosion was a small orange STAR on the horizon, fading as the distance grew. Reid leaned back. The exhaustion was complete. There was nothing left in him. But he had done it. The 18 men were vindicated. Torres was avenged. The conspiracy was decapitated. The machine was blind. The pilot spoke over the intercom. Sir, we have an incoming transmission. From the Pentagon. Acting Secretary is requesting a debrief. REID reached for the radio. He paused. His finger hovered over the button. Then he turned the radio off. Tell them nothing, he said. Tell them we were never here. The helicopter continued north, into the darkness. The fire on the horizon was gone. The city lights were gone. There was nothing but the STARS and the cold, steady hum of the engines. Ma RK turned to his father. What now? REID looked at his son. For the first time in years, his eyes were not HRD, they were tired. They were heavy. But they were also clear. Now we wait, Reid said. We wait to see if the machine rebuilds. And if it does, we break it again. The helicopter droned on. The night stretched forever. But in the cabin, between father and son, a tentative peace had been forged. Not a truce. Not a resolution. But a beginning. A Shah-Red purpose. Reid closed his eyes. He did not sleep. He did not dream. He simply existed in the moment, the first moment in 6 years that he had not been running Tower RD something. The STARS were cold. The engines were loud. But John Reid was finally still. And in that stillness, he found something he had lost long ago. A fragment of the man he had been before the burial. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded letter from Torres. He unfolded it for the last time. He read the words in the dim light of the helicopter's interior. Then he folded it again and placed it in his son's hand. "Keep this," he said. "So you never forget why we did this." Mark took the letter. He did not read it. He did not need to. He held it against his chest, a talisman of truth. The helicopter banked. The coastline read, a thin line of darkness against the lighter sky. Dawn was approaching. The night was over. But the war was not. The machine was blind, but it was not destroyed. The roots remained. The seeds remained. And somewhere, in the shadows of the system, a new architect was already emerging. Reid opened his eyes. He read ahead, into the brightening horizon. The engines hummed. The letter was safe in his son's hands. The machine was blind. But the machine was not dead. And John Reid was not finished. The helicopter set down on a private pad CRVD into the cliffs of the Maine coast. The sky was a pale, watercolor gray, the sun not yet fully risen. The rotors slowed. The door opened. Cold, salt-heavy air rushed in. Reid stepped out. Mark followed. The two soldiers and Voss remained on Boa RD. The old operative was still cuffed, his eyes dull, his face a mask of defeat. He was no longer a threat. He was a relic. Reid walked to the edge of the cliff. The ocean stretched before him, infinite and unforgiving. The waves crashed against the rocks below, a rhythmic, ancient sound. He stood there for a long moment, his hands in his pockets, his breath fogging in the cold air. Mark came up beside him. "What do we do with VOSS?" Reid did not turn. "We turn him over to the federal prosecutor. The evidence is public. The server FARM is destroyed. The network is blind. But Voss still has value. He knows the names, the contacts, the structure. He can testify. He can bury the remains of the conspiracy." Mark nodded. And after that, Reid finally turned. He looked at his son. The anger in Mark's eyes was gone, replaced by something quieter. Acceptance. The slow, painful process of rebuilding. After that, we go back to being people. Not soldiers. Not fugitives. Not avengers. People. We find a place. We sit down. We talk. We try to remember what it was like before the burial. Marksta read at the ocean. The waves rolled in, rolled out. The sky lightened to a pale gold. Is that possible? Mark asked. To go back. Reid shook his head. No. We can't go back. The past is gone. But we can go forward together. That's the only choice we have. Thy stood in silence. The helicopter engines clad with a soft hiss. The sound of the ocean filled the space between them. Reid reached into his pocket. He pulled out the photograph of Sergeant Torres, the one he had tossed onto the podium in the ballroom. The paper was worn, the edges soft, the image faded. He read at the smiling face of the man who had died in the valley. "I made a promise," Reid said. "And I kept it. That's all I can do. That's all any of us can do." He turned the photograph over. On the back, in the same faded ink as the letter, was a single line. "The truth is the only thing worth dying for." Reid held the photograph out to Mark. "Keep this too. Remember what he gave up. What we all gave up." Mark took the photograph. He slipped it into his pocket, next to the letter. The two pieces of paper now rested together, two fragments of a LA Ridger story. We should go, Reid said. Before the authorities decide to CRCH this area. Before the network recovers enough to strike back. He turned away from the cliff. The ocean hummed behind him, a distant, Unka ring drone. Ma RK followed. They walked Tawa RD a waiting vehicle, a de RK SUV with tinted windows. The driver nodded. The doors opened. REID paused at the vehicle. He looked back at the cliff, the ocean, the sky. The morning was breaking, the sun a thin sliver of orange on the horizon. The world was still turning. The machine was blind, but the system was not dead. He slid into the vehicle. The door closed. The engine sta route. The SUV pulled away. Inside, the cabin was silent. Ma RKSTA read out the window. Reid leaned back in his seat, his eyes closed. The exhaustion was a heavy blanket, but he did not sleep. He was waiting. Watching. Listening for the sound of the machine as it began to rebuild. The SUV drove on, into the rising sun. Behind them, the cliff faded into the mist. Ahead, the road stretched into unknown territory. The network was blind. But the network was not dead. And John Reid was not finished. The story was not over. It had only just begun.